really excited in our collaboration with Ideawake here at HeroX. And today we're going to be talking about, how organizations are dealing with some of the challenges that they're facing in this modern era and the high rate of change, the need for innovation. And we're going to talk about, some of the best practices and approaches that are proven and working. And this is part one of a two-part webinar series. So in this part, we're going to be, talking about the kind of high-level stuff. And part two, which is January 26th, is that correct? Yes, January 26th. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty and talk a little bit about how organizations can implement crowdsourcing and ideation specifically. And I've really been impressed with the work that Ideawake's been doing. And I invite all of you to come to that next session and really get a lot of great value and a lot of education from there as well. We'll start with, let me see if my slides will actually, there we go. And so Cody, just give everybody an idea of who you guys are and what you guys do.
Sounds great. Hey, thanks, Christian. Hi, everybody. My name is Coby Skonord. I am the co-founder and CEO at Ideawake. And really, HeroX and Ideawake and why the partnership between us makes, so much sense in my mind is that we're two sides of the same coin. So where HeroX is looking at bringing the outside in, inside of the organization, Ideawake is looking at bringing the inside out. So we help companies with over 250 employees normally capture, evaluate, and implement ideas from frontline employees. And we're doing that in over 39 countries and 185 cities. And our product offers full lifecycle management of ideas from the inception of the idea and making that a very fun and engaging process for employees, all the way through to tracking and measuring impact on the ideas that are implemented. So we're doing this in over 12 different verticals. And like I had said, all throughout the globe, on every single continent except for South America.
That's great. And, I think that's a really important point is, they, like a lot of organizations talk about innovation and they're kind of looking for, hey, we need to find innovation, but they don't think about like the life cycle. I think that's the key word you used, innovation life cycle is really important. Like once you have these ideas, how do you commercialize them? How do you, help them move the needle in your organization? And that's really important. So I like that. I'll just, for those that don't already know, talk a little bit about HeroX and what we do. So we're an open innovation platform that helps connect organizations that want to solve problems with the amazing and near limitless power of the crowd. No matter who you are, some of the smartest people work for somebody else. And we have this thing called the internet where we're all 2 clicks away. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to, realize that leveraging that collective intelligence that is available is a competitive advantage. It's for those that tap into that, their organizations will be stronger, and that'll be the topic of today. So, so why don't you talk a little bit about kind of what you guys have seen in the market and some of the trends and the needs, and then I'll kind of share my view as well, and we can make it conversational.
That sounds great, Christian. So, because everybody still loves talking about COVID, even though it's 2021 now, it's still here. But this is a study done by McKinsey back in early 2020. And it was just looking at the impact and how much COVID is fundamentally transforming the way that business will be done, not just in the COVID era, but the post-COVID era. So 90% of CEOs believed that COVID-19 was going to fundamentally change the way they do business over the next 5 years. And 85% were concerned that it would have a lasting impact on customer needs and also the way that their products and services would be delivered. Yet only 21% felt that they had the expertise and resources to actually adapt to this change. And so this really, once again, ties into that partnership, Christian, right? And looking at both sides of the coin, bringing the inside out, but also the outside in.
Yeah, it's a really important point. And, it's amazing to think that it's only really been since like late March, early April that, COVID has hit us. Like I was actually in New York, like March the 15th, to speak at a conference that ended up not happening as New York was shutting down, and it was pretty crazy. But it hasn't even been a year. It feels like a lot longer. and organizations are just catching their breath now. And, they're now needing to lead into this future. So yeah, that's really great.
And that just, I mean, really ties to, and what I like to do is set the stage for technology and just, the internet, which is technology, obviously, but it's accelerating the rate of disruption, and it's accelerating it at ever increasing or expanding rate. So in the last 15 years, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies that were listed on the stock exchange are no longer listed. The average life expectancy, this is always a crazy stat, and it's always very difficult to say, but from 1955 to 2015, the average life expectancy decreased by 60 years. So that's an average of one, a year for each year that's gone by, that the average life expectancy has decreased. So now you're looking at 15 years if you get listed. By the end of that 15-year period, you'll no longer be listed.
Yeah, and I've seen this stat a lot. And one of the things, we're not saying that organizations like disappear, like they go bankrupt and they're gone, but there's like mergers and acquisitions, and organizations sell their business units to other organizations, and they change their focus, and it just really points to the huge rate of change and disruption, and the fact that technology is accelerating that stuff. So I think that's really important.
And it really tells the story of, no industry being safe from new models of delivery. So taxi cabs thought that they were safe until Uber came along. Same with media and content. So Blockbuster Video to traditional news sources. Then you look at Netflix, or just, online publishing in general, and the crowdsourcing of publishing, which we could do a whole hour-long talk on just out of passion. But then healthcare itself, this is just a fun one that I like putting in because it really hasn't quite happened yet. But you can see the same trend starting to happen in the healthcare space with a lot of the Amazon Care is the example that most people on this conversation are probably going to know, but there are several other models for primary care that are coming up that are full virtual delivery. They have none of the physical infrastructure, and as such, they can offer actually free primary care, and they're actually creating a subscription service out of it. So they're reinventing healthcare, just like Uber reinvented taxi cabs.
Yeah, and that's really being accelerated by COVID. Telemedicine has just been kind of thrust forward, and I've talked to a lot of people about their experiences there. And what's really interesting is there was a lot of initial resistance. The people were almost forced into it, but overall, the experience has been overwhelmingly positive for many people that I've talked to. And it's a good example of that COVID effect that you talked about and how things are going to change. It's really forced people to move into alternative, methods of communication and meetings and service delivery and other things. And it's going to be hard. It's hard to imagine that we're just going to go back to the way it was, like nothing ever happened. So, that's piling on like yet another set of challenges for organizations that need to adopt to the changing consumer sentiment around these technologies.
Really what this means at the end of the day, right? So is companies need to continually reinvent themselves. And from our perspective, right, front and line employees offer a diverse perspective. And then also obviously from HeroX's perspective, as Christian had mentioned, right, a lot of the best minds live outside of your four walls.
Yeah, I think, and I'll segue from here. But I think it's really important to emphasize that, your employees are some of your best assets in an organization. They, especially the frontline, I like that word, frontline employees, they're really the eyes and ears of the organization, and often they can get a sense of what's going on, better than anybody. And they're also the ones that are going to first see the trends and the changing sentiment of customers. And so in engaging with them to help participate in innovation is really important, and creating a life cycle for innovation that is really all inclusive across the entire employee base. Very important. Gone are the days where you can have like this dev team or product team, up in an ivory tower, that are deciding what features to be delivered and how it works. Organizations that are built that way are not going to be able to keep up and do what they're doing. So I think that's very important, and I think it's very synergistic with crowdsourcing. So, we talked about this a little bit, but, the thing about it is things, all these technologies are merging together to accelerate change, exponential technologies, network effects. That's causing a lot of problems in the organization, in many organizations. And one of the ways to look at it is that what's happened is that the driven by technology and the internet and communications, which has merged, Moore's law, with increasing technology capability with network effects, which bring exponential cycles, exponential adoption curves to how these new products diffuse into the market. All that's led to an acceleration of the market's rate of innovation, the collective rate of change of the market. And if your organization isn't keeping up with that rate of change, you're creating a gap there. And that's what every leader in every organization needs to think about: is how are we doing? How is our rate of innovation tracking with the market rate of innovation? And if you're not keeping up and you're falling behind, or there's gaps being created, or you're just not able to adopt these things as quickly as you need to, that gap is going to widen. And if you play that tape out, it doesn't get better without really focusing on this problem. So, innovation is a weird word. There's, what does it mean? Well, like, how do you define it? If for fun, I Googled innovation models and went to the images page, and these are like, this is literally a screenshot of just of that search result, right? And it just shows that, like, the overwhelming kind of thinking and frameworks and models for innovation. Where do you even get started? It's an overwhelmingly complex space. There's a lot of good stuff in here, and I recommend people learn and research this stuff. I've read a lot about innovation. I've got a lot of books about innovation on my bookshelf, and that's all really great. But there's a much simpler approach that organizations can jump into with very, very little learning curve, which is called crowdsourcing. And the crowdsourcing term is very general and generic. It can involve all sorts of different applications. But in the realm of innovation, when you kind of look at using crowdsourcing for innovation, the best term for that's open innovation. But crowdsourcing is really about defining a goal, sharing it openly, gamifying it, creating a structure with timelines and a submission process and a scoring system, and then motivating, incentivizing the crowd to give you the answers. And that really creates this amazing funnel of innovation where the crowd is self-selecting, self-motivating, self-organizing, self-managing, and self-reporting to deliver the solutions to you. And we're going to get into a couple of examples of that in the future. But this same kind of dynamic also applies to the employee innovation stuff that you guys do. Isn't that true?
Oh, no doubt. It's just once again, right, it's confined to your four walls for the most part.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time you see everybody talks about breaking down silos, right? And so looking at cross-functional collaboration, one of my favorite examples is Amazon Prime. A software engineer came up with the idea for Amazon Prime. Normally you think that would be, right, a marketing and PR meeting or like ideation session, but really Amazon was very early to adopt the type of system that we, sell as a service today. And it came right from the place that you least expect it, which you often find diverse perspectives, right, internally as well as externally, have unique approaches to solve complex problems.
Yeah, I love that Amazon Prime example. And that's an idea of $100 billion idea. Like, Amazon Prime was a game changer for Amazon. And I could actually do a whole talk just on Amazon Prime and just going through like how it initially was a crazy idea. It was a crazy idea. Could be abused, and there was lots of reasons not to do it. But now, I read a stat a while ago that more people have memberships to Amazon Prime than attend church. Think about that.
God.
Yeah.
Geez, that's astonishing.
It is. Yeah, it's crazy. I think it's like 10% higher or something like that. I would rattle off the numbers, but I don't have them in front of me and I don't want to mess it up. But yeah, if you Google it, you'll see. Yeah, it's insane. So yeah, and the power, and what we're really talking about is just using the power of networks, right? Like, and the beauty of this is that you know, the crowd is huge and they self-select. Like if you think about, okay, the word crowd, I'm not a huge fan of the word crowd. Like, who's the crowd? Well, the crowd is us. The crowd is people, right? This should really be called human sourcing. You know, you can crowdsource anything in any space where humans know enough about it to contribute to it, and that's pretty much everything. And so we've seen, you know, these are some of the areas where we've you know, done crowdsourcing projects. So it's extremely diverse and powerful. And it's really driven by, you know, this is one of the better books I've read. It's about a 15-year-old book on kind of understanding the dynamics of innovation called the Medici effect. And it focuses on the Renaissance, right? In Florence, the Medicis, which is the family that ruled over Florence back in the 1600s, 1700s, which are really recognized as launching the Renaissance and the Age of Enlightenment from the Middle Ages. And all they really did was they were just indiscriminate patrons of artists and philosophers and scientists, and they brought them into one place and let the ideas mix and mingle. And the book also goes through many other examples of the power of diverse thinking and the power of diversity and the power of random and chance intersections of ideas throughout history. And it's a really great example of that, just kind of you know, demonstrates what's the underlying force that's really driving crowdsourcing and open innovation. And that applies, by the way, with inside an organization just as much as it applies outside an organization. It's the collective and unique experiences of your team members and their ability to collaborate, their unique and different perspectives is going to deliver a better outcome than siloed thinking.
100%. And it really just ties back into, right, that same theme of the ability to break down silos, which really doesn't happen, right, in the physical environment. And, you know, when companies implement this, it's often times that they're using SharePoint or some other, you know, Microsoft Teams is coming in now, which is great, but oftentimes doing crowdsourcing, right, it's not designed to do the collaboration at scale and connecting people based on, you know, interest or a common problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, now it's Microsoft Teams versus Salesforce Slack. Think about that.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
Isn't that crazy?
It is.
Again, another example of just the high rate of change. I mean, Slack existed for what, maybe 7-8 years.
Yep.
And boom, you know, they're part of Salesforce now, and who knows where that's going to lead.
Yeah, I'm looking at stuff, you know, how like we used HipChat. I'm not sure if anybody here it was an Atlassian product. If anybody uses Jira, which is a lot more common. But, you know, HipChat was very similar to Slack. And it's really interesting to look at the anecdotal evidence as to why the jury's not out on it. I don't think it'll ever be out, but why Slack was so much more successful than HipChat, even though they really did the same thing. They were a real-time chat application. And even before HipChat, so many others existed. But then Slack comes in and just takes over the market and gets acquired by Salesforce.
Yeah, it's a whole other webinar topic, really. And you can put Dropbox in that same bucket. You can put Airbnb in that same bucket, as you know, companies that there were tons of earlier versions of them, but there was something special about these organizations that they took off where others didn't. And it's a really interesting topic. And so, you know, there's many ways you can use crowdsourcing. These are kind of 4 common models. You know, today we're going to be focusing on open innovation. These models aren't all mutually exclusive. You can often tackle 2 or 3 of these in the same campaign, which is really interesting. But open innovation is one of the, you know, best and most consistently successful applications for crowdsourcing. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit more. I'd like to jump into an example. And this is a project we did with NASA, and it lets me talk about poop in a business context, which is always fun.
Yeah,
Yeah, so this is the Space Poop Challenge, which was a $30,000 incentives. It was actually, there was 3 prizes that collectively added up to $30,000. So think about how powerful that leverages the capital, because I don't know if you know how much NASA can do internally for $30,000, but it's not a lot, so
have a meeting.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. Make a space fork, you know. But we love NASA, so it's tongue in cheek.
Me too.
Yeah, but this was just an amazing example where they literally had rocket scientists, because they literally have rocket scientists, like, right, trying to figure out how to how to do number 2 better in space, because it's one of the biggest complaints that they get from their astronauts, in terms of their employee experience, is that the number 2 experience is not great. And I've seen videos, and they've got to wear like goggles and face masks and a plastic suit. So yeah, I think you can fill in the gaps from there.
If you want to go to Mars, you got to figure out how to do number 2.
Exactly. Yeah, and in fact, yes, the space station's set up there, their porcelain throne, which isn't porcelain, by the way, it's plexiglass or something, is like the size of a large washing machine from the 50s. And the needs for the Mars mission is kind of like at a smartphone level, in comparison. So that's really what drove this. The great thing about it is that they just got a huge number of submissions, and this was an ideation challenge as well. So they were asking for ideas, designs, concepts, and the solutions that they got, have been folded into the Orion project, which is the next manned mission program for the moon and for Mars that NASA is working on. So this has made a real difference to the organization. And it's a great example of the collaboration. See, the crowd didn't solve the problem, and NASA internally didn't solve the problem. It was the collaboration between the outside and the inside, both doing what they do best. And that, like, life cycle perspective is really important. And NASA, because they're one of the few organizations that's tackled so many new things. They're always tackling something that's never been tackled before. They're scrutinized as a public agency. It's often life or death. So it's a really unique look into how innovation is managed successfully, and they've gotten really good at it. And they do a lot of crowdsourcing, and that should tell people, you've got $1 billion R&D budget, and you're doing crowdsourcing. Demonstrates that crowdsourcing is not about saving money or being cheap. It's about being effective and moving fast, and that's a really important point. And another example I love to share is dairy farming, right? So think about dairy farming, right? So Land O'Lakes, which is in New England, is a dairy cooperative, a nonprofit dairy cooperative that helps dairy farmers, small dairy farmers, compete against the big boys. And they're really proud of their farmers, and they have a long history. And I don't know if you've had their butter, but it's pretty damn good.
Time or 2.
Yeah, there you go.
Every week.
And so they they used HeroX and crowdsourcing to look at how technologies can be adopted by small farmers to keep them competitive. Things like drone technology, which is a game changer. And this was a really successful initiative with really a small budget comparatively, and collectively shared across hundreds of independent farmers. So that's another example. Anything you want to add to that, or what I've talked to so far?
It just really shows the breadth of use cases. So, I mean, it started off in, right, looking at the dawn of the internet and what enabled crowdsourcing. It started off a lot with publishing. and it's just expanded into everything. That slide that you had a couple examples ago, but kind of bringing it home in a different, I guess, lens of looking at Land O'Lakes. You don't think of butter as being right innovative, and I know they do more than butter. That's what I know them for, though. But it's just crazy to see. It can be applicable in every single industry, and pretty much every single area of the business. It's just a matter of giving it a shot or getting the stakeholders bought in to make it happen.
Yeah, and a lot of it's about back to that early slide, right? It's like, think about the 75-year life expectancy of a enterprise versus 15, and what that really demonstrates is that back then you could get a job, you learned to be good at that job, and you could do the same job and retire, more or less doing the same job at the same company. You get the gold watch, boom, right? We're all familiar with that stereotype. And now, the organization you work for is probably not going to exist, long enough for you to even have a career there. And think of that disruption is what's behind that is, that people are learning and adopting new ways of doing things and needing to. Those that do are rewarded. Those that try to stick to the same thing are punished. So even dairy farmers, if they just stick to dairy farming the way they've done it, they're going to be obsoleted, right? And so organizations like Land O'Lakes know that they need to help these dairy farmers, give them proven innovations, and help them stay modernized and updated to be competitive. And that is that's often a game changer. And it can often sound overwhelming to people because they read the media, they look at tech blogs and stuff like that, and there's so much there. But the one thing I'll mention is that it's like the old adage, right? It's how do you escape being eaten by a bear? You don't have to run faster than the bear, you just have to run faster than the friend beside you, right? So that's the way to look at it. It's not that you have to adopt every technology and solve every problem and have nanotechnology and AI, and no, just look at the competitive landscape and ask yourself, are you running faster than your competitors, who, because the bear is hungry, or are you falling behind? And that's a lower bar to follow. So even a little bit of innovation in some key areas can be a real game changer for an organization in the real market.
Definitely. And a lot of the time I think of it like, just kind of going off of your point, Christian, it doesn't, a lot of the time we find that it's best to, if you think of innovation like a muscle, your innovation capacity inside of your organization, a lot of the time people try to do, they try to bench 250 pounds, right up front. And that's actually what the leadership expectation is when the program's formed, which I think we've come up with about 6 different other webinars that we could do.
Yeah.
But the problem is that with setting those expectations, you're setting yourself up for failure a lot of the time, because you're trying to deliver something when you haven't done the first step in actually building out your process. And so you start stumbling all over the place. It takes too long to produce a return on investment. And the program dies. You see this over and over again, versus trying to start small. It doesn't have to be changing the way that your organization delivers products. You start incrementally, right? You start to just build little pieces of your process, instead of trying to build the whole thing with a complex solution that is going to be customer facing, organization wide for the first thing that you do. So oftentimes it doesn't work.
No, that's great. And I love to mix metaphors, so I'll mix your metaphor with my metaphor, right? So if the first time you run hard is when the bear is right behind you, the race is already lost, right? You gotta practice at smaller scales and be conditioned so that you can do the big innovation well, because you can't start from nothing. And I agree with that 100%. I think I actually think innovation starts with culture, like creating a culture of innovation is the first step, and cultivating that, and that requires systems, right? What supports a culture is a shared set of behaviors. What creates a shared set of behaviors? Well, one of the easiest ways to do that is to have systems and tools available to your team, so that they can practice and spend time doing innovation. I talk to a lot of organizations that adopt these these types of employee innovation and idea management platforms. And initially they can be underwhelmed, like, oh, we're not really getting these great ideas. And yeah, but your team's practicing, your team's engaged, they're thinking about it, right? And so, like I said, it's, you know, it's not realistic to think that you're just going to go and ask them, and, you know, your engineer is going to give you the next Amazon Prime. No, you have to have a culture of innovation, and that means there'll be lots of, you know, bad ideas, and, you know, ideas that don't get developed, and creative thinking that feels like it's being done for just creative thinking's sake. But if you keep at it, and you see the value and the power of ideas, because everything starts with an idea, right? Everything starts with an idea. And if you don't manage those ideas and curate them and hold them valuable, even when you're not implementing them, you're not going to develop those muscles, as you describe, that are going to give you the really great breakthrough ideas. And so a lot of organizations, I think, give up too quickly. Oh, it's not easy. And you know, success is just around the corner if they persist with it, and if there's a commitment from the leadership of the company to do that.
Mm-hmm. Tone at
Yeah.
the top is so critical.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, especially for this.
Yeah. And, you know, for those that are still skeptical, I'd recommend looking at this book, which really covers, you know, what they call in the book the three mega trends of organizational change and the markets, which is machine learning and AI, which is the first one. The third of the book is about that. A third of the book is about the platform model, how platforms like Uber, which is really a platform, you know, multi-sided platforms. Airbnb is a platform. Platforms are disrupting almost every industry in many different ways. I mean, it's hard to see that there isn't an industry that's has some platform, and I won't get into the details of it, but, you know, platform is enabled by networks and technology, and it creates the ability to, you know, provide services at a level using technology. Airbnb wouldn't be possible without some pretty good technology. And, you know, hotels, you know, Airbnb is hotels' biggest threat, and Airbnb doesn't own any real estate, right? It's kind of crazy. And that's the power of platforms to upside down things. So it's really important to understand that. And then Crowd, obviously the power of our collective collaboration online, which is the part 3 of the book, you know, is obviously purview to this webinar. So I recommend that book for those that like to geek out on first principles. And I think we'll wrap with this visual, which is from the book. Now it's not from the book. I used my crafty artist skills to draw this out in PowerPoint or something, I forget now, to represent what the book talks about. And what the book talks about is the old organizational model, you know, which was this idea that we're going to have this, you know, a secret environment called our office building that's like secure and trusted. We're going to have all these secret meetings, and we're going to, whenever we have, you know, a problem, we're going to call a meeting, we're going to invite the right people, we're going to bring the right information, we're going to solve the problem. And that's kind of the old model, but, you know, they call it the core only model. And then the crowd, of course, is everybody outside of that trust organization. And so their whole point, and we've got many examples of this, radical examples and very traditional examples of organizations that have a core team. They're still there. They're still really important. They're no less important, but they engage with the crowd, and they have a model and a framework that allows that to work. And a great, you know, very aggressive example of that would be like Wikipedia. They actually cover this in the book. And Wikipedia first started as a crowd only approach, and it was a disaster. It was a disaster. And they realized they needed a core team that created the discipline and the systems of figured out how to avoid you know, misinformation and abuse of the platform, and most importantly, maintain the quality of all the content. And now, you know, Wikipedia is a rock solid source. It's blown away any other encyclopedic source that's out there. And that's that dynamic between the crowd and the core. So even something that at a distance looks like a pure crowd thing, there's actually a really strong core. Most organizations, they have a really strong core, customer, they do product development, the manufacturing, customer service, customer support, the finance stuff, all of that's really important, never going to not be important. And they have a little bit of the crowd around product innovation, talent acquisition, ideas, customer engagement, other things. And that'll be the model that will work for them. And, my argument is if you have a market with, 10 competitors, and 3 of them are using the crowd and applying a culture of innovation and managing and talking about things like innovation and idea life cycles, they're going to move faster than the other organizations, and they're going to dominate. And I think that the more you look around with that lens on, you'll see that that's the case. So that all make sense, Coby? Anything you want to add to that?
Makes perfect sense. You just need to, I mean, really what you're doing, the core can be responsible for helping the rubber meet the road, right? So setting up the rules to the game for Wikipedia's case, right? But how we like to look at it is you have osmosis, right, happening. And the more that you can create a really solid organization that can take in that external feedback, whether it's from customers, the public at large, just using, right, the collective intelligence of this global community that now exists.
Yeah.
And then being able to, right, have a strict process that allows you to really quickly separate signal from noise and move faster, get it out the door. You can go back to the crowd for that, but there has to be strict rules to the game, very similar to how Wikipedia, right, set up its editing model. Because it still was, right, largely crowdsourced. And it's now, right, you look at like, this stat always blows my mind. This was, I mean, a couple of years back, but on average, as or more accurate than the Encyclopedia Britannica, but like by a factor of like, it's like 50, like in terms of the breadth of content, right?
Yeah.
So same level of depth, but like the breadth is just off the charts, right? So you have Wikipedia articles about everything, but just as, on average, just as accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think the important point here, and it's covered well in this book, by the way, is a lot of people's initial reaction to these types of approaches is really a scarcity mindset. Like, especially with crowdsourcing, they're like, well, so then you're going to try to like, do stuff that, without staff, so you won't need staff, right? It's like this. It's like conflating crowdsourcing with outsourcing, right? Where outsourcing really was about getting rid of an internal function and giving it to another organization. And outsourcing has really nothing to do with crowdsourcing. But the reality is that what we're really talking about is synergy, is an abundance mindset, that the synergy of open innovation and the traditional methods are very positive, and they feed each other. It's not an either or situation. It's a we're better with both situation. And that's really the way to look at it. It'll make organizations have more to do. Successful crowdsourcing gives people more to do, and there's a lot to do. So it's not a situation where we're going to be outsourcing stuff to other organizations. But I think that kind of wraps, and I think we're basically at time, or I should say, ready for some Q&A. So let's get Carter. Carter, where are you? Where's Carter? Carter, you need to say something really wise.
Hi there. Well, that was a really fruitful conversation. I was really interested in the Medici effect. Is that how you pronounce it? That book. I haven't read it, but I would like to. And it kind of reminded me of, a lot of the content I've been reading about kind of the rise of generalists and kind of how, generalists, are really valuable in the, innovation process, and how they might be able to, offer a perspective that maybe the specialists don't have, and the specialists can take what the generalist says and test it out and see if it's a viable solution, and that just really kind of hits home and how, everyone, all employees, regardless of department, really needs to be, included in the innovation process. So
like I said, that there's a whole webinar topic there, but you don't have to look very far to see the power of the Medici effect. In fact, one of the simplest ways is just look at like Elon Musk, right? And who transformed the car industry? Was it a car expert? No, it was a guy who had zero experience other than driving a car. He had zero experience with cars, right? And you look at the first Tesla, right? Laptops, they have good batteries. Okay, let's put 6,000 laptop batteries in a car. Like, this is crazy stuff, right? But it represents diversity of thinking. So then, okay, now how do you equal? I don't know if you know a lot about lithium batteries, but having 6,000 lithium batteries together is an engineer's worst nightmare, because lithium batteries have to be balanced, and if you don't charge them right, they do things like vent with flame. I actually think is a term, vent with flame. I don't think you want to.
Sounds safe. Sounds very safe.
It sounds super safe, and I own a Tesla, so I don't want any venting with flame to happen under my bum. So, but they pulled it off. I mean, people said they wouldn't pull it off. They pulled it off. It's amazing. And they didn't do it by digging deeper into the secrets of the automotive industry. They did it by having the freedom to look for solutions anywhere, and find out how to apply them. And you just see that time and time again. Like I said, it's a whole topic, but
Our first principles of SpaceX. You can't talk about Tesla without SpaceX, man.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I could also talk about SpaceX, but then I just start sounding like an Elon groupie, and I don't want to do that.
I don't want to sound like that guy, but I probably am that guy. If I'm being honest with myself. So
yeah, I hear you. Yeah. So Gina, do we have any questions, or is there like a chat I'm supposed to be looking at?
Our attendees have been very quiet, Christian. I have a question myself, just bringing this back to the partnership between Ideawake and HeroX. So, the topic of this webinar was, when to bring the conversation beyond the scope of I love the concept of actually using something like Ideawake software internally in your company to practice, to get your muscles strong in your creative thinking. And then how does HeroX then tie into that, and how will we be looking forward to seeing a future of this partnership together? And maybe you guys could speak to that a bit.
Well, that's great foreshadowing for the next webinar. Absolutely. But the quick version is what HeroX focuses on is matchmaking solvers with sponsors, with organizations that are looking for ideas and innovation. So the simplest way to look at it around, like I said, a culture of innovation is important for everybody. And a culture of innovation inside your organization is, I think, it's a critical precondition to successful innovation. Crowdsourcing, without really the ability to take those ideas and develop them out and come up with problems, because a new idea comes up with a million problems. Amazon Prime created a lot of problems. Like, the idea of Amazon Prime created a ton of problems that had to be overcome for it to be successful. So like I said, great ideas create more work, not less work for the staff. So the ability to break those problems and come up with solutions for them is really important. Open innovation can help bring crazy ideas that just might work to an organization, and that's going to create 100 new innovation needs, also known as problems, to the organization that can be solved using an internal approach to solving problems. The way I like to describe it is that hey, if you can solve all your problems internally, great. You go outside your organization when you need to. So the two are very synergistic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just to kind of go off of what you were saying, Christian, it's like it's not each one of the processes, outside in, inside out, can play off of each other, like at every single stage of that funnel. So it's you look at the upfront, right? If you have you do some ideation, or that you need to go in a strategic direction, you could go out to the crowd externally to ideate to get a diverse perspective outside of your organization. And you could rank that using your employees internally, right? You could crowdsource the ranking internally with your employees. Then going through the validation and prototyping process, a lot of the time, right? Like you said, innovation needs, I think I'm gonna borrow that, also known as problems. A lot of the time, right, when you hit that validation and prototyping phase, with those additional problems or innovation needs, you have, right, the same amount of people, and you always have core operations, and everybody's already too busy doing the core operations to do anything new. And so being able to not outsource, that's, it could be a very dirty word, don't want to say that here, but being able to, offload a lot of the, capacity on a, temporary basis in order to like deliver a specific task versus bringing on an FTE for it, we've seen work well as well. So
we call it freelancing, like when we bring freelancers in.
Yeah, 52% of the workforce, right? That was like as of a couple of years ago too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, that's a whole other webinar topic, and probably a great application for your platform as well is leveraging your freelance community and all of that. There's a kind of a gray, like it's a spectrum between kind of crowdsourcing, like totally open crowdsourcing, and the internal one. There's many shades of that, which again we'll get into in the next webinar. I don't want to talk about that too much, but I think that was great, and I think that we can probably wrap unless we have any other questions.
We did have another question come in through our Q&A, and Coby actually spoke to that a little bit. It's in regards to what an optimal approach to balancing the different scales models of organizational innovation, such as internal versus external, or generalistic versus specific. So, the balance between the two approaches. Can we speak to that a little bit?
Sure, yeah, I can jump in. So I'm a pragmatist, and I think this is where, looking at it from a pragmatic solution or a perspective, I should say, is the best way to do it, because conceptually it's hard to give a concrete answer to that. You'd have to look at, okay, well, what is the goal of, let's say, a project or initiative? And then now you can look at, okay, if, in order for us to find a, biodegradable packing material that's as inexpensive as what we're currently using to ship our product, right? You get into something that's really specific. Now you can start asking those questions and see, okay, like, how are we going to, is it, do we have the resources internally? Do we have the answers internally? What part of it could we go external? What's the, often when I do, a workshop on actual applying innovation, often what happens is you can map out the steps. That's everything that needs to happen for the innovation to happen. And then there's these like magic occurs here steps, right? Where it's like, well, how does that actually happen? Well, we don't know. Okay, so, and that's the magic occurs here is probably where you need to do some more digging. It could be tech scouting. It could just be some good internet research, or it could be crowdsourcing, or it could be all three. And like I said, there's a lot of overlap between those three approaches. One thing I will say is crowdsourcing is where you're openly sharing, and it lets you not have to worry about managing as much, because in many ways properly broadcast and incentivized crowdsourcing is kind of like, if you're looking for a needle in a haystack, the needle comes to you. It's like a big magnet that will let that needle come to you, and you don't have to worry about the haystack. But there's no one size fits all solution. Once you get into the specifics, and use your insight and your wisdom, I think you kind of get an idea of how to do it. And often, from a risk management standpoint, you can apply multiple approaches in parallel.
Do them in baby steps if you can, right? So it's kind of going off that, right? There's a different mix for each company depending on their use case, and also what's the best way to say it, right? Budget and the leadership's willingness, right, to adopt these types of technologies without a clear return on investment and a time horizon to that return. And so it's really just having a good understanding of that, and understanding, like Christian said, what your goals are. And then from there, you start to validate and test, right? And actually you're building the mental muscle first, the innovation muscle, and then you start to expand that throughout the organization. You get successes based upon how much leash you have within the organization. And then you just, land and expand out from there as you get success.
And that divide and conquer approach, that's a really big one. Again, not, we can talk about that more as part two, but if you reverse engineer success stories, one of the things that you do really well, and this is something that both Tesla and SpaceX has done really well, is convert big problems into smaller problems, right? Chop them and break them up into smaller and smaller and smaller problems, because the smaller problem is, the more solvable it is. And often that's something that I think organizations don't do as deliberately as they could. And that feeds really well into, an idea management platform, where instead of having one, ask for your staff, for example, you can break it into 23. And now they've got something that's very specific that they can chew on. And that works really well. So great.
Excellent. Thank you both. So I'm going to post some contact information in the chat for attendees. So if you want to continue the conversation, I'm very sure that both sides are happy and willing to share and speak with you further. So unless there's anything else, we can probably wrap up early. The recording will be going out to our attendees today. And just thank you all, and we'll see you at the next segment of the webinar.
Awesome. Well, thanks everybody. And for those that are watching the recording, thanks for attending, and for our studio audience, thanks for attending.
Definitely. Just to repeat what Christian said, thanks to both studio audience as well as, those are going to be watching afterwards. Hope it was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Great session. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you.